Hi everybody! So my name's Katie Schell. I'm one of the tutors at the University of South Carolina Writing Center, and I'm making this video for anybody who wants to work on revising for a final portfolio. So this video was inspired by the English 102 students at U of SC who are currently working on revising for their final portfolios, but the things I'm talking about here will really be useful for anyone who wants to get better at revision. And I know I can talk a little bit fast, so there will be a transcript of this presentation in the description for anyone who needs it. So I'm going to be covering three topics in this presentation: revision, editing, and hacks. So just for a general overview, revision basically refers to making big changes to your paper. Editing refers to making small changes, and then hacks here refers to the little tips and tricks that I like to share with my clients at the Writing Center. And everything I tell you guys about in this presentation will be strategies that I personally use when I revise, so I hope it'll be genuinely helpful to you too. So the first thing I'm going to talk about is revision, and revision refers to making changes based on what we call higher order concerns in your paper. And like I said, that means any big changes. So that means adjusting your thesis, looking at your main ideas, changing around the paragraph structure, etc. And the reason you want to do this first is that if you try to do this sentence level editing first and then revising later, you might end up making a big change to the paper, like taking out a paragraph that you just spent 15 minutes editing. So you always want to start with revision. And then the next thing that I'm going to talk about is editing. So editing refers to making changes that involve lower order concerns, which basically just means anything sentence level or anything that deals with smaller details. So this is grammar, making changes to your word choice, changing your sentence structure, etc. And then, like I said, the hacks section here is about the little tips and tricks that you can use to revise or edit. And these are all things that I use in my own writing process. So these will be time savers, websites you can visit, and just little extra tips to keep in mind as you revise. Alright, so like I said, the first thing you want to do is revision. And the best thing that you can do is start by reading your whole paper over again. This is especially helpful if it's been a while since you wrote it, but I always recommend starting with that no matter what. And you can also reread the prompt at this point if you still have a copy of it. And then the next thing you're going to want to do is review any higher order feedback you received on the paper. So if you got feedback from your professor saying that your thesis needed to be more argumentative, that your organization could be stronger, or anything like that, you're going to want to review that now. And if you don't have any higher order feedback yet, feel free to visit the Writing Center. We'd be happy to give you some. The next thing I always do when revising is read over the first and last sentences of my paragraphs, and then create a new outline for the paper. So you can skip making a physical outline if you want, but the idea here is to pay attention to how each paragraph is moving your argument forward. And this is a good way to notice areas that you could improve. So if you notice any trends in your paragraphs that might need some attention, things you could do more of, or things you need to change, you can do that now. And sometimes it can help here to zoom out. So what I mean by that is to look over your paper without actually reading it, but just kind of scrolling through it or getting a feel for how your argument develops. It's sort of like skimming it, like you would skim an article that you don't have time to read. And if that sounds daunting to you, you can try just talking through your argument out loud to someone else or just to yourself. So those are all strategies you can use to do higher order revisions for your final portfolio. And then once you make some progress there, then you'll want to move on to the editing phase. So my number one piece of advice for editing is to copy and paste the paragraph you're working on into a fresh document and just tackle that one paragraph at a time. This really helps you get a new perspective on the movement of the paragraph and to just not get overwhelmed by having the whole paper in front of you at once. And then once you've done that, you can review any lower order feedback that you've gotten for that paragraph. And again, if you don't have any, you can always make an appointment with the Writing Center. I also recommend that you read out loud as you go. This doesn't help everybody, but I would say that with most of my clients in the Writing Center, they find that this helps them to notice changes they can make to their writing. And I would say personally, it really helps me too. And then in terms of what to actually look for, it's always a good idea to compare each sentence in the paragraph back to the topic sentence. And that just helps you make sure you're staying on topic and that you don't have any unnecessary information in there. And then once you're confident that all of your sentences belong in that paragraph, then you can start to pay attention to things like your sentence structure, your use of transitions, just making sure it all sounds natural and it all makes sense. And when you start to feel confident in that paragraph, I always recommend looking at the intro and conclusion sentences one more time, just to make sure that they still go well with each other and that they're accurately reflecting the whole paragraph. And then you can just repeat this process with each paragraph of the paper, and then you're done. So I definitely recommend spending extra time on the intro and conclusion paragraphs, though, because those are the ones that can really give people trouble. You just want to make sure that they reflect your thesis and that the development of your main ideas and your argument are represented well. And then the last section here is hacks. So my number one favorite hack to share with clients is the Control-F function in Microsoft Word or Google Docs. So if you notice that there's a phrase that you tend to overuse or a word that you want to make sure you're using correctly, you can use Control-F to find every time you use that word in the paper. I do this every single time I write a paper, and it's been a huge help for me. Personally, I always search for the word is, and I try to find a more interesting verb that I can use instead, but you can search for whatever words make sense for you. So I know a lot of people struggle with semicolons, so if that's you, you could use this to double check your use of semicolons. And if you're hearing that and you're thinking you have no idea what words you would need to search for, then I would recommend the Hemingway app. So this is a free website inspired by the writing style of Ernest Hemingway. Basically, it analyzes your writing and uses a color-coded highlighting system to let you know where your sentences get long or repetitive or whatever. So just as a disclaimer, I don't recommend automatically following the advice that the Hemingway app gives, because everyone's authorial voice is unique, but it can be a helpful tool for people who just need something to get them started thinking about their writing. And I also recommend using text-to-speech websites. So the one I personally use is naturalreaders.com/online, but there are a million of them out there. And running your paper through a text-to-speech site before turning it in, it just helps you to catch any awkward sentences that you might not have noticed on your own. And it can also just be easier for some people to focus while editing if they can hear the words as they're going. I know these websites really help me focus, especially when I do a lot of writing and revision at one time. Another big tip is to use the comments feature to leave yourself notes as you go. So this is a really good thing to do to keep you from getting stuck. If you've been working on the same sentence for 10 minutes and you just can't get it to sound right, just leave yourself a little comment and come back to it. It really makes editing and revising so much less stressful. I also recommend having a friend read your paper for you. I realize that not everyone has a friend that would be down to do that, but if you do, it's super helpful. It just helps you notice holes in your argument or little changes you need to make that you might not have noticed on your own. But if you don't have a friend to get that second pair of eyes on the paper, you can get a similar effect by playing with the formatting. So a few years ago, I learned that psychologically, staring at the same words for a long time can train your brain to stop actually reading what they say, which is how you can still end up with a typo even after proofreading a paragraph 17 times. So one way to get around that is to literally change what you're looking at. I always change the background color of my documents and read them on my phone at least once before turning them in, and almost every time I notice little issues that I wouldn't have noticed if I hadn't changed the formatting. So I highly recommend trying that out. And the last hack is to visit the Writing Center. Genuinely, the tutors at the U of SC Writing Center love helping clients with revision, and we're more than happy to help you apply these ideas to your specific paper if you need help with that. It's just an invaluable resource for anyone who wants to revise for their final portfolio. And it can save you some time too, which I know we could all use a little more of these days. So I'm just going to leave you guys with some resources before I go. There are links to everything I mentioned here in the description. So links to the websites, a click-through version of this presentation, and there's a full transcript in case you want that. And I also put the U of SC Writing Center's link tree down there, so you can check that out if you want. And of course, feel free to email us at the Writing Center anytime, englwc@email.sc.edu, and we're happy to answer any questions you might have for us. And that's all I got. Good luck with your revisions, and all of us in the Writing Center hope to see you come and visit us soon.